You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
Born wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sophia, and today I have with me Adelaide, and I'll just hand it over to you to introduce yourself to listeners.
Hi, women. It's such a pleasure to be here on this podcast. I know that Sophia and I have had some conversations just, in our own personal and professional work. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is rad. So I'm really grateful to be here. My name is Adelaide Meadow, and I am a women's health care provider. I run a well woman care practice, and I attend births as a home birth midwife. But I am very much interested in biomechanics and biodynamics, and that's a lot of where my professional work centers, is bringing together the worlds of exercise physiology and human biodynamics into the world of midwifery care. So I teach a lot of courses and movement instruction specifically for female physiology, everything ranging from strength training for the female body to very detailed learning about healing, prolapse, and diastasis. Not really from a like get your mom body back in shape vibe, but instead from a long-term pelvic health and integration perspective. And then really bringing the brilliance of our biodynamics, and biomechanics, so really how we move in an alive way and how that informs the birth process. So I think that there is a lot of really helpful information out there about how to prepare for birth. And I think that can be great, but some of it might be a little bit sort of misinformed or underinformed about how babies actually make their way through the pelvic pathway. And what I'm really interested in is how we can impact soft tissues to allow birth to unfold the most optimally and easily for mom and baby. And that's my personal and professional both interest. And that looks that, and I explore that not just in my own midwifery practice, but in working in women's health more broadly, and working in collaboration and teaching trainings for other birth workers, body workers, and women's health professionals. So that's what I do. Yeah. And a lot of community organizing for women as well. So
such an important topic, because I would say, we're not worried about the baby coming out. The baby comes out great. The thing that sometimes derails a home birth are these ones that are 5, 6, 7, 8 days long, where you're just like, the mom is exhausted and you're trying all the things. And, it's not about, the fear of the baby coming out. It's like, how can we get the baby to come out? So I think speaking about this is really important for midwives, students, and even parents. I know we have clients who are like, that was a really long experience, and it I could do it. Like, she was signed up for it and it just wasn't happening, in her opinion. So knowing what women could do differently next time, how they could be supported differently prenatally. But before we get there, I do want to hear how you even got here. Where did your journey begin to end you up supporting families in this way?
yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. There's so many things I already want to respond to in what you just said. And hang on. I just said okay to the recording. I just realized I hadn't said okay. Does that mean it was recording this?
I think it's still recording. It hasn't said it's not recording.
Okay, cool. Then maybe you just edit that a little bit out. Yeah. I mean, babies do come out, and but what does it take? And how is that baby? You know what I mean? Like, maybe some babies are chilling with sustaining the 6-day birth, and maybe some are not actually. And so then we're also working with, the sort of illusion of time in the birth process, and how there is both the timeless space of birth, and then there is also quite a real progression of time. And I know that maybe sounded esoteric, but I feel like we work with both, and that, babies do come out, and how do we help that happen in the timely and least stressful manner for mom and baby, that's really what I think midwifery care can really help you with. Like, that's the, in my opinion, that's where we can.
Yeah, because if women are like committing to this and then they might feel like, oh, well, I must not have released all my fear. I must not have, because if our bodies work and our babies know how to be born, then it's me, or the team I
Right.
had with me, I couldn't relax enough because people were there, you kind of go outside sometimes.
Yeah.
And
And
maybe
I think
that's what was going on, but I think sometimes it's more of this navigating the two.
totally. I think you originally contacted me because I put out a bunch of memes that was like, maybe it's not your mother wound. Maybe it's your restricted posterior pelvic floor. Like, maybe it's not your fear of breach emotionally manifesting your breach position. Maybe it's like what's actually happening with your respiratory diaphragm and your right lung and your left rib flare.
Yeah, I was like, I want to hear more.
And you're like, right. And so like, and I'm not saying obviously that birth is not a, complex, emotional, spiritual, like multifaceted experience. Of course it is. And I know for me, in all of my birth and midwifery education, there was a significant lack of emphasis on the body, which seems staggering to me. Because birth happens in the body. And maybe I can, answer your question a little bit more about how I came to being interested in what I'm interested now in the birth world, and just in women's health in general. So I would say that my trajectory, this could be long-winded and I will keep it not long-winded because I want this to be more applicable for listeners of like, okay, cool, but what do we do? But for those of you that are interested, I came into working with the body largely through physical trauma to my own body, which I got in a very severe accident and broke my neck and my back and my pelvis and spent many years in rehab, relearning how to walk and talk and read and write. And I just had to entirely rebuild from a neurological, from a speech language perspective, from a basic motor skill perspective, not to mention, I had also really had significant pelvic injury and trauma. I was told I would never be able to have a child. And then the like hormonal cascade that happened from that degree of medicalization and brain injury, internal hemorrhage, blah, blah, blah. I was very hurt. And it took me the better part of like 7 years to really like put my physical body back together. During that time, I learned a lot about the body, right? And it changed my professional trajectory to center on women's health when I had a different professional trajectory at the time of my injury. So what that led me to was specifically being very interested in A&P, in anatomy and physiology. And so I shifted gears and I did significant anatomy and physiology studies, and I was a yoga teacher. And I was, teaching yoga and teaching within the Iyengar yoga method, which is a very sort of anatomy heavy understanding of the yoga practice. And what I became really interested in was the relationship of movement to resolving pelvic health symptoms. So I had a whole host of pelvic health concerns, ranging from sort of complex rectal prolapse to like full body infections, anorgasmia, cervical dysplasia, right? I just kind of had the whole gamut. And I wasn't actually finding resolution within the vast majority of Western medical care, which I'm not against sort of like Western medical care by any means. I'm a poster child for it saving my life. And where it stopped being of service to me was in the rehabilitation of my women's health following significant injury. I also had a lot of pain, right? I'd broken my back, I'd broken my hip. So just like I had a lot of hip and pelvic pain and wasn't really creating resolution. So fast forward, I had, was a movement teacher, and, that means a lot, ranging from taking like a 200-hour yoga teacher training to obviously lifetime of movement professional. But I was, sorry, there's a banging on the outside of this building, but it's just the wind, I think. So I was like, what is that? So so during that time, I then, became a birth doula, like a lot of people do. Well, I should back up. I started teaching prenatal yoga because I was a full-time yoga teacher, and I started teaching prenatal yoga because the pain that the women in my classes were having was pain that I was familiar with: SI joint pain, back pain, pelvic pain, pubic symphysis pain. They're things that I had personally healed in my own body, not really through the yoga practice actually, but through other physiological study. And I began to teach prenatal yoga. Women began inviting me to their births. I began attending births. And then I was like, okay, maybe I want to do this. But it was coming from my study of female bodies specifically. Then I took a doula training. Then I went to midwifery education, went to midwifery school. And I ended up sort of walking away from my licensed midwifery trajectory when I was, pretty far down the path of that, and had been attending births, and then just to open my practice unlicensed. And then I was practicing in that way. And I did preceptorships along the way, and did a fair amount of trainings along the way in that sort of in that unfolding as well. And I have sort of walked the line between whether I want to have my licensure and sit the board exam or not. I have only ever lived in non-licensure states, so that is also somewhat complicated in the US. If you're a non-US based listener, midwifery professionalism in the United States is a very regional experience. So it's not uncommon for the women that are practicing where I have lived and practiced to not have their licensure because of the complexities of the sort of legality in these places. And even the word midwife, I always wonder if I should be using it or not. It sort of varies, but that was my educational trajectory, with an interest in being licensed in home birth midwifery that now I've kind of walked back and forth for many years. But alongside that progressive birth education, of which I've taken just so many different trainings and learned from different midwives, I've also been continuously studying my biomechanics and biodynamics, and done so many movement trainings, everything from kettlebells to Feldenkrais to yoga to Pilates to becoming a personal trainer, to then really focusing on sort of a physio level exercise physiology lens. And now, and it's just never stopped. I'm now in a high level training that's specifically on, respiratory diaphragm function, and how that relates to like positional breathing for pain resolution, and then how that actually then relates back to pelvic health and function. So being a mover and an athlete alongside my women's health education, because so much of what I was taught as a mover and an athlete and a movement professional was directly antithetical to what I saw was actually needed for the birth process as I was watching babies be born. And then as that has changed and improved a little bit in recent years, there's less like clench your butt and tuck your tailbone as there was when I started in this world 15 years ago. And even still, let's take it one step further, where I'm like, okay, now we're actually seeing such amazing progressive work in our exercise physiology world that is having immense benefits for people's multi-systemic health, not just whatever, maybe their sports injuries, but their scoliosis or their MS or their neurological challenges or whatever. And how do we actually bring that incredible biodynamic education into how to help your baby through the inlet, the mid pelvis, and the outlet? And that's a lot of where my professional contributions now lie, is sort of interest, collaboration, research, and really like thinking with other women around how to help babies be born, and really how our bodies are changing in our modern culture, and how to really be bringing that in to our birth practices. So
Great. Yeah, because I know like spinning babies brought so much awareness to.
Yes, I should talk about that too.
Yeah. Because I know that was kind of something that not many people knew about, and I feel like it's pretty almost mainstream maybe now.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to hear some suggestions for women who are listening who are pregnant, or like, what can I do in my pregnancy to give me the best shot?
Yeah. So I love spinning babies. I love Gail. I was trained with Gail back in 2015, almost 10 years ago now. So I was a spinning babies parent educator. I learned just recently that I think I was the first class of parent educators. I didn't know that at the time. And because this has just been what I've been into, and I, maybe it was 2016, whatever, 10 years ago. And it was so formative to me, right? I really loved, and it changed it. I really loved what I learned in that. And I still use that stuff today. What I then found, both in my own body and in my birth attendants, was sometimes that wasn't adequate. Meaning we would use the incredible skills. So I'm thinking, if you're spinning babies familiar, there's spinning babies. There's also the aware practitioners trainings, and there's more now. But we're thinking about like the 3 sisters of balance. We're thinking about, the forward leaning inversions, the side lying release, standing sacral release, these techniques, these body work techniques. And a lot of them were, at least the training that I took, and I know it's definitely evolved, but was, in a hospital, and it was largely about resolving with women that were having stalls in hospital births that were unfolding. Maybe they were bedridden, maybe they had epidurals, maybe they didn't, but it was within that setting. And then they were brought into the home birth setting as well, which was great. But what I did notice is that I would be using these, or women would use these, and they wouldn't work. And it's not that they wouldn't do something, but they maybe wouldn't do enough. And what is enough, whatever, a lot of these babies still were born and came out, but it wasn't like some of these, like, release, ka-chunk moments that I had also seen. I started seeing more times where it'd be like release, hard, release, hard. And maybe that baby still comes out, but there wasn't that like ka-chunk and resolution moment. And that
was the two things we're seeing. Either it's like, yes, the big shift, or no, we feel like we're still in the same boat.
You're still in the same boat. And I started to see that too. And I've just spoken with other midwives that are like, yeah, that is what I'm seeing. And I really got to think about why. The other thing that I've been seeing and hearing a lot more of is so many OP babies and so many breech babies. And we're not, that research, we're in it. And I'm not really in a clinical research perspective. And that's probably not going to be the trajectory of my work. And so, I don't want to, sort of speak out of hand and say that that's what I do, because it's not. But ultimately, I think if someone were doing that research, and if you are, get at me, please, midwives, let's start into that. I want to talk to you. But, just anecdotally with women of like, wow, I actually see a lot more breech now than I did 5 years ago. I see a lot more breech than I did 10 years ago. I see a lot more babies OP than I did 5-10 years ago as well. And, who's tracking these numbers? Who's looking at it? What are we considering breech? When? What's happening? Are these babies being sectioned? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot that kind of gets in the way of having accurate numerics, which is why I want us to research this and look at it in 10 years. But I think that that's actually really interesting as well. And so I started wondering why, and really as I was learning more about sort of essential movements for the female body and what actually allows for optimal pelvic health, and what allows for optimal pelvic health and function in regards to elimination, menstruation, pelvic floor health, healing prolapse, painful sex, minimizing infection, the whole sort of pelvic structural or the pelvic health gamut. A lot of that comes back to structure. And this is a huge part of what I do in my work and in my well woman care practice. Birth is not like, it's not the only thing that I do. I have some home birth clients and I take a set number of births a year, but a lot of what I do is in pelvic health, and sort of the well woman care aspect of this, of our work. And I found that most of the time, those structural or those sort of symptomologies or those pathological expressions could be largely improved, if not entirely resolved, in the majority of cases through a structural integration approach. And I know that structural integration, it's a specific term that means something to the Rolfers. And, I get that. I'm not trying to take your language or anything, but from a very sort of cut and dry perspective, meaning what's happening structurally on a bony level, on a soft tissue level, on a fascial and like on an organ level, and then our fascial structure and our skeletal muscle. What's happening with the actual tissues of the body and how are they working and mobilizing in an integrated way for optimal function, managing pressure within the system. And when we see resolution or improvement in fascial mobility, in muscular position and function, muscle volume, tone, and capacity, as well as bony alignment, and when we're actually looking at function from that perspective, we see a significant resolution in a lot of those symptoms. Mm-hmm. And I began to wonder, and I'm still just open and wondering how that actually relates to baby's pathway through one baby's position, and we're thinking about fetal position in pregnancy. I don't actually believe that fetal positioning is random. I don't believe it's entirely discernible either. I think that there are mysterious things that happen in birth. I also think that there are things that are like placental positioning and placement and cord length and, whatever. I think there's absolutely things that are not impactable. But one of the things that is significantly impactable is the soft tissue, right? We can truly change soft tissue. And when we change soft tissue, we can change bony alignment, right? And so the fact that we can create change there made me quite interested in how those changes were affecting birth, because I would have seen women create change there and have them entirely change their pelvic health outcomes, non-birth related. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I never came across that in a very detailed way, the kind of only thing that scratched the surface for me was spinning babies, but not like, well, why are these babies in these positions? What's happening in pregnancy? What's maybe happening in our entire lives and muscular development as women to have baby in these positions? And then if we're doing all these releases, which again, I have nothing but respect for these spinning babies, midwives. I've learned so much from them. And how can we continue to really be thinking about our sit, stand, walk, move, breathe patterns in pregnancy and preconception as well, ideally, that might be creating the environment that allows these, either these fetal positions or these tissue restrictions to be in place that then would need to be resolved or would be supported through resolution, if not need to be resolved language, would be supported through resolution in birth. Because if I've never been able to mobilize my respiratory diaphragm or expand my posterior pelvic floor, and the first time that I'm trying to do that is with a hour-long protocol when I'm day 2 in labor and those tissues have never moved that way, that's a big ask. It's a big ask physiologically. That's a tall order for that mom, and that's a tall order for that baby. Does that mean it won't work? Probably not. It means it probably will work, but could it work smoother, easier, with less stress, and have less pelvic health repercussions in the postpartum period that then need to be integrated, which are likely not from the birth at all, but likely from the pattern that was existent prior to the birth that potentially was, showing up in the birth and part of what we were interested in the resolution for. That sentence went a little off the rails, but I think you got the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Like hypnobirthing, because like people are like, does hypnobirthing work? I'm like, well, if the first time you're ever doing it is in labor, like, sure, maybe it'll work, but like, it would have been better if you'd been practicing it all along. And that it's just like, you're just gathering tools. Like, don't let it be your only thing that you're falling back on, like you just gather as many tools as you possibly can. Ideally, you're working with them prenatally so that by the time you're in labor, you're familiar with it. Your body is, your mind is. I feel like it will help you more. So
Totally.
it sounds like this can just be like another tool for people. And another thing, when I think of like babies in position and soft tissue and bones, is chiropractic. I'm curious about your thoughts around chiropractic care in pregnancy, labor.
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is I'm pro chiropractic care. I want to start there. And chiropractic care is as diverse as medical care.
Yeah.
So when we say, if someone says, are you pro medical care? I'm like, yeah. And like, if you're asking me that question, like, of course, is there an incredible moment where that is going to be helpful? Absolutely. I am pro that. Now, does that mean that I think that, I don't know.
And is every practitioner equal in that care?
Yeah. And that's like the point that I'm trying to make. So like, I just want us to not cast, like an overly wide net. I think is some chiropractic care going to be helpful and some chiropractic care going to be harmful. Of course, just like any other type of care, it's as diverse as the practitioner. It's as diverse as the framework and the education that they're working with, right? And I think any practitioner worth their salt, and definitely myself, right? And again, I like to say I'm another bozo on the bus. I don't carry any medical licensure. I'm just a random woman who likes to think about this stuff, right? So who the heck am I? But there's definitely care that I've given that I'm now like, oh God, that was not physiologically informed. That actually wasn't helpful. And I know better now, years later. And I think any practitioner worth their salt could likely say the same thing. So we're all, we'll start there. Now, chiropractic care in general, we're working with the nervous system. We're also working with the bony structure. So, if we're going to talk mostly about the bony structure, because how subluxations affect the nervous system is something that is like, I'd be speaking a little bit above my collar. Like that's not totally my area of expertise, but I have chiropractic recommendations if you want to have that episode on your podcast. But we do know that, having significant subluxations or, aspects of our skeletal structure that are not moving, if we're going to say it like that, can impact the nervous system and put undue stress on the nervous system. And then having the resolution of that, meaning returning back to motility, can alleviate stress on the nervous system. And ultimately that is incredibly helpful for a variety of systematic, like for the health of our systems overall, every system from circulatory, respiratory, endocrine, whatever. So nervous system care, here for it. The second thing that I like to share about chiropractic care and my understanding of it is that if we're not actually interested in moving bony structure from the incorrect location back to the correct location, and that's a misnomer of the way that structural care functions. Instead, we are thinking about taking something that's immobile, meaning it's maybe in one of the positions through a healthy range, but it is stuck in that position, meaning it's not moving, or at least not moving very much from within that range into the other positions that bone is designed to also move within. Does that distinction make sense? Mm-hmm. Does that feel clear?
I remember when I first learned about that, it kind of blew my mind. Yeah.
Right. So nothing's in the wrong place. We're not putting it back in the right place. It's in a position that's immobilizing it, and we're interested in remobilizing, which instead of therefore corrective care, we're interested in restoring mobility. Now, restoring mobility does not mean restoring laxity or contributing to hypermobility, which is what I want to speak a little bit about, how a structural approach that's really taking into account musculature, fascia, breath, movement, sit, stand, walk, breathe patterns integrates with chiropractic adjusting. So why are our tissues not moving? Why are our bones in a position where they're unable to remobilize? And this is a big question, but one answer to this question, one answer of many, has to do with our lack of mobility in certain areas, ranges of motion coming from our coming from our fascial tissue and our muscle tissue, and an excess of mobility in our fascial tissue and muscle tissue in other areas. So this is sort of the hypermobile discussion. Not to say that I'm not talking about people who like are hypermobile. That's sort of a different talk, although this applies to those individuals, absolutely. But if something is like moving too much, like has a ton of range, right? It's usually because something else isn't able to move through its healthy range. And so something's restricted for something else to be super mobile. And usually what is creating those restrictions, I would argue in the vast majority of cases, is our fascial tissue and our muscle tissue and our skeletal muscles. So why do you keep having sacroiliac pain, right? SI joint pain? Why do you keep having sciatic pain? Why do you keep having pubic symphysis pain that is then resolved by a chiropractic adjustment? Well, it's ultimately, I would say, because the resolution of that pain long-term is going to be due to building different muscle patterns, how we are actually moving, how we're activating our glutes, how we're releasing the internal pelvic tissues. And if that doesn't happen, then we might need to keep going back to the chiropractor, and your adjustments don't quote unquote hold. And we might not be addressing why those subluxations are occurring in the first place. And I know for myself, I used to go to the chiropractor at some points in my healing. I went like 3 days a week. And I had all this mobility in my SI joints, and they would always like go out, so to speak. And I would go put them back into mobility, and then that would happen again. And I actually developed more laxity, and it was harmful. And it wasn't until I essentially stopped getting adjusted and then built a lot more sort of strength and stability in my pelvis through, not through doing squats and more core work and Pilates, but through a different type of kind of restorative mobility and restorative strength building, that I was able to really garner the benefits from chiropractic care. So I don't know, that's kind of a broad topic.
So they kind of like work together to support each other. They're supportive.
They need to, right? You're looking at nervous system and you're looking at the bones, and I'm also looking at the muscle tissue and I'm looking at the fascia. But if we're interested in why our bones are in that position, it's definitely informed by our muscle tissue and our fascia. So if we're not actually working with those tissues, and what's cool is that's low-hanging fruit. We can do that every step we take, every breath we take, every time we pick up our kid. Then, like, if we're not doing that, then I don't think our chiropractic care is ultimately going to create long-term lasting change in many circumstances, which doesn't mean it's not a part of care. Now, might we actually need the bones to mobilize to be able to activate some of that musculature and then some of that fascial tissue mobility? Yeah, that might be the precursor. The other might also be true. I might actually need to mobilize some of this tissue and not have so much tension and be moving better in my musculature for my bones to be able to move in a way that isn't stressful to the body, right? It's both and. And for the women that I'm serving in pregnancy and in postpartum, that's the approach that I take, is like, have a really good chiropractor. I'm generally a fan of low force adjustments. I really like people that are, significantly nervous system informed. I want someone that also would adjust a newborn baby. If they don't feel confident adjusting a 1-day-old baby, I don't actually want to go to them as a chiropractor. That's just me personally. Trained in low force techniques.
Really blessed. We have a chiropractor, actually a chiropractic club here that are pregnancy and pediatric specialists, which is really great. And they do like biodynamics and spinning babies, all those.
And like phenomenal work. Yeah. Right. And so many of my colleagues that I respect and learn with are chiropractors. And so I'm like here for it, here for the cause, think it's awesome. And working from like a true movement perspective, not just getting adjustments, I think is a really crucial component to supporting the overall structural health and how it relates to midwifery care and birth.
Well, what does your work look like with families who are wanting this? Is it obviously you can do it in person? Do you do it virtually? Is it like a recorded class that people would purchase through their pregnancy? Like, what is it that people can?
Yeah. So before even, if you want to work with me, great. I'll talk about that in a minute, but let's talk about what women can actually do on a broader level. Yes, movement for pregnancy. Absolutely. Movement is healthy. We need to be moving. The idea that the way, like this is the common thing. It's like you birth the way you live. Like we hear that being repeated, but this is really true in terms of a movement perspective. I actually want to support women in moving and not moving in necessarily habitual ways, not like stretching, not necessarily just like doing lots of squats, but moving in very structured ways that are geared towards supporting baby's pathway through the pelvis during the birth process. And some actions that I think are really crucial for women to focus on during pregnancy are as follows: the pronation and supination of the feet, right? So I really want women to have mobile feet, where you see that having a significant support for the pelvic mobility. And we won't go into all the A and P of the fascia as to why that is the case, at least not here in this podcast. I'll give you more if you want the why behind a lot of this. But if you're just listening of like, okay, I'm a birth worker, what it is that I want to support my clients with, or I'm a mom or a parent, and what it is that I want to either support my wife or support myself. If you're interested in this content, this is what I'm interested in. So pronation, foot pronation and supination, and strengthen the feet, actually getting those arches to be able to lift and be able to drop, being able to do adequate weight shifts, meaning we actually shift our weight, the foot pronates, all the arches spread, and then we're also able to create a sense of power and all of those arches lift. You can, whatever, there's lots of people you can follow, or you can look at my stuff for pronation and supination drills of the feet, but it's really crucial. We'll often see women, if you're, giving birth, or I was watching a friend of mine's birth video recently, and she's just like she's like standing and bent over and just like working her feet. You just like see her weight shift and like pronate one, supinate the other, and you just like see this incredible foot mobility, and you're just actually watching. It's amazing. You're just watching the sacrum move into that sort of nutated shape, and it's amazing what we.
Because as you mentioned it, I have totally seen that. And who would think about the feet for giving birth?
So it's the first one I want to talk to you about, right? Create mobility in the feet. It's gonna help your ankles, your knees, and your hips move all the way up the chain, right? So that's number one. The second one that I want to focus on is internal rotation of the iliums. Now, I often talk about this as internal rotation of the femurs, right? So those thigh bones being able to spiral in, which totally. And if I have a course where that's what I call it, internal rotation of the femurs, and you're going to look at it that way. But as I'm even speaking about this more and more, I want to be more and more specific. So what we're really interested in, I don't know, this is not a video, people are watching. I was like, let me grab my pelvic model. But the iliums are those side bones of the pelvis, right? We have our iliums on the sides and the sacrum, and the iliums wrap around and become the pubic bone, inferior and superior, right above that clitoral hood. But those big, wide hip bones, right? And also the sockets, those acetabular cups, and your sit bones, those are all one bone that is, obviously we call it different things at different locations on that bony structure, but they're all truly one bony structure. And the ability of those bones to abduct, meaning physically move away from the midline and then internally rotate. So we want those iliums to wrap forward and towards the midline in the front, while the whole bone itself is moving away from the midline. And if you want visuals about this, I have a course, it's all about this, and I'll show it to you. But
you can send it to me and I could link it in the show notes.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. But that capacity, one, is going to widen your mid pelvis, which any woman who's ever given birth, anyone who's ever watched a woman give birth, that's where rotation happens. And I just learned this. If you're just doing this right now, I just learned this from Nicole Morales, this little tip, and it was so helpful to me. Point your finger and your thumb and squeeze them together as hard as you can. Right. And now try to move them. They don't really move. You're just squeezing them together. And now just don't squeeze. And now move. And I love that. I just never had heard anyone do that. So shout out to you, Nicole. And she was like, the amount of movement, like the amount of space that's needed for a baby to be able to slide and rotate is minimal. Like we're not talking about making inches or centimeters of change, right? And so if you're able to get any mobility in that way of those iliums moving away from the midline and internally rotating, we don't need a lot, but just a little, whew, it can make all the difference in that mid-pelvic time and in that active labor time and that baby being able to rotate, right? Which is super helpful. Or if they're not going to rotate, be able to fit in the position they're in. That's the thing. Some babies don't rotate. And we can talk about that, but not today. But like, you know, it doesn't, I'm not here to pathologize the fetal positioning, but like just giving that little bit of sliding room is that's the name of the game for supportive midwifery care, I think. So like, I mean, among other things, but it's up there. So
along with bendy straws and
what?
I said along with bendy straws and cold compress.
Along with bendy straws and cold compresses and just like loving women and loving babies, of course. But I'm just saying that that little bit of wiggle room is just so cool when you actually let it fall into place. And so that happens often from learning to actually internally rotate those femurs and having adequate internal rotation. Pregnancy is an externally rotated time structurally, and the female pelvis is externally rotated on baseline from the differentiation from male anatomy. So and then we're often taught to just like turn your feet out and deep squat, and as though that's going to help. And I would say it often doesn't. It actually exacerbates the opening of the inlet, which is, you know, sometimes babies get hung up at the inlet, but you know, it's a little more common that it's happening in the mid pelvis. So that ability and what we're looking at being able to do that, we're looking at strengthening your glute medius, strengthening your internal rotators, actually. And then the sort of second aspect of that internal rotation brings us to the third sort of aspect. So pronation, supination of the feet, internal rotation of the iliums and the femurs. Again, some people can internally rotate the femurs and not the iliums, specifically my bendy Wendy's that have a ton of range of motion in the hips and maybe like third trimester. So IR or the femurs does not always equal IR of the iliums, but it often does. And if it doesn't, for you, hit me up. And if you don't know, then we can try and figure it out. But what brings me to the next thing, which is spaciousness in the posterior pelvic floor. So I want women to have the ability from sort of like their sacral tuberous ligament from the side, the lateral aspects of the sacrum, and between those lateral aspects of the sacrum and the sit bones, I want that tissue to be yielding. I want that tissue to be able to expand. I want that sacrum to be able to move. If you don't want to think about nutation and counter nutation, just think about that tailbone moving out of the way, moving up and back, and then also being able to move down after baby and like somewhat towards the pubis to create laxity in the pelvic tissue after baby has moved past the bony aspects of the pelvic outlet. So we want that mobility in the sacrum, and we want those sit bones to be able to move apart. Many of you, if you're listening to this, are probably familiar with that like knees in, feet out, that like kifo position to make space in the posterior pelvic floor, make space in the outlet and the butt, which like that's all fine and good if it works. That's all fine and good if you actually have yield in the tissue. And if you don't, then you can do in that you can go in that position, but your sacrum doesn't move and neither do your sit bones. You've just moved your spine, right? And your knees, and nothing has actually happened in the back of the pelvis. So training for those tissues to be able to mobilize is really, really important. And that's obviously related to the pronation, supination of the feet, the IR of the iliums and the femurs. And then the last one is rotation of the thorax. So the ability of your thoracic spine, your rib basket. Remember, your heart's not in a cage, it's in a basket always, right? And it's open like a basket. But this thoracic rotation, really managing rib flare, managing, having that thorax be over the pelvis is going to allow for the diaphragmatic mobility, which is going to ultimately allow for more pelvic mobility. So we are often in this sort of open scissor position, meaning ribs flared, pelvis tipped forward in pregnancy. That's totally fine. That's the design of pregnancy. We're able to make space that way. But what can happen if that is exaggerated and we begin to lose rotation in that thoracic spine and in that rib basket space, we'll see shortness of breath, that mid-back pain right around the bra strap area that so many women feel in pregnancy. We'll see heartburn. I also think I think this is my conspiracy theory. Are you ready? I think it's also related to vena cava compression and all the women that can't lay on their backs and struggle. But it's like, oh, there's a magical 40% of women who are fine, but everybody else. And it's like, maybe it's not that magical, maybe we're actually seeing, again, my conspiracy theory about compression in the posterior respiratory diaphragm and how it relates to the position of the heart and the descending vena cava, and how then you have this rotation because you're always carrying a baby on your hip. And then you have this counter rotation of the ribs. I mean, I could get into it, but I really think that we can create torsion and then compression on that descending vena cava. And then we have a lack of circulation and we feel like crap when you lay on your back. So there's a lot to that. That was a tangent. Maybe you should edit that out. But and Jamie from the breach release, we were talking about my conspiracy theory. So if you're listening, we have to think about this more together. But what we're really interested in is to be able to support comfort and like support space in the respiratory diaphragm, support if you have chronic heartburn. Maybe it's not that you are eating something wrong. Maybe it's that you actually don't have room for your organs because your lungs are compressed and your fascia is compressed in the back body. And
if you haven't won women over yet, you will with the heartburn tip.
Oh my God, right? And then you do everything and you're like the papaya enzymes. Yeah.
I tell people like most of the time we can get you pretty comfortable and our suggestions work, but if nothing's going to work, it's usually the heartburn one where we're like, sorry, you'll have your baby eventually.
Okay, can we just talk about this for a second?
Yeah,
this is another small passion project of mine. Okay, so I'm a pelvic health practitioner. I'm like, everything's going back to the pelvis, but like my mind is slowly changing and I'm like, oh wait, does it all actually come back to the respiratory diaphragm? It might. After 10 years of pelvic focus, I'm like, oh God, okay. And just another shout out, I learned a lot from this from Katie St. Clair. She's not a births person, she's an exercise physiologist, but if you're into this stuff, she's a really great resource. And like the PRI, the Postural Restoration Institute, I don't know if you have chiropractors that listen to this. I'm just saying I'm interested in birth, but I don't come from a vacuum. You know what I mean? I learn things from a lot of places, but the heartburn aspect, what I often think of is that we're in the significant rib flare. A lot of women have more rib flare on the left because of the heart being on the left, right? And then they hang on, do I want to get that detailed? Whatever, we actually won't do left, right. We're just saying, okay, so there's this rib flare, the ribs are up, right? And they're kind of compressed back. Maybe their right hip is forward because maybe they're right dominant, right? That might be how they stand. Maybe they always stand on their right side with their left leg turned out. Very common postural pattern. Maybe they always hold a baby on that right hip.
Or driving, if you drive a lot.
Right. And so they're ever sort of shoved forward on that right side, which keep in mind, we actually have right obliquity, which means everything is spinning to the right, but then you might have compression on the right because it's all shoved forward, right? Which might be an aspect of breech positioning, but your baby's high on the right and stuck in your ribs, but even that's fine. Also, we can have breech babies and whatever, but we just like want them to be able to move. But for the heartburn aspect, if we are putting all this pressure from the back because we don't have a lot of room in the respiratory diaphragm, we're actually breathing. Maybe you were taught to belly breathe your whole life, which contraindicated for women. Your lungs aren't in your abdomen. That ain't it. We need to laterally breathe and breathe into our back. So if we don't have that lung capacity, then we have shortness of breath, which how often does that come up with heartburn? They're like bedfellows. And so we have these unhappy bedfellows. And when we truly learn to draw the ribs down, again, this is hard third try, right? So it's better to be working on this earlier, but it's still possible third try. Sometimes with like a lift and tuck and some counter pressure, just maybe some hands-on work is helpful at that time in pregnancy. But being able to draw those ribs down and posteriorly shift that whole thorax so that your ribs aren't ahead of your pelvis, right? Or aren't like slumped back, right? With your pelvis shifted forward, but you actually have that alignment. You're going to be able to breathe better. When your organs aren't pushing so much from back to front, but are actually expanding front to back, then you're going to have less pressure on the organ of the stomach and up into the esophageal sphincter. It can often sink down slightly, like it's literally being lifted up because the lungs are pressing forward because the angle of the thorax is tipped back, right? And then we don't have any rotation. Women like can't turn to roll over in bed. They are lacking rotation. And so what I'm often interested in is making space right at that, like the infrasternal angle, like right below the bottom of your sternum, making space there, or almost like right below the breasts, having a really supportive bra can be helpful as well. Not restrictive on the back, but supportive for the girls, right? So lifting the breasts up and moving the rib basket back and working on rotation. I've seen people that have had horrible heartburn, if we're able to create that for them and they do that consistently, it truly does resolve. Because it's not, I mean, and it is also, there's increased stomach acid. Like we have, you know, like there's other things we can minimize that, but I would say the cause of most heartburn is in fact structural. Okay.
It makes sense. I got heartburn at like 5 weeks with my first pregnancy. I was like, wait, what? Like, I thought this was supposed to happen later when the baby's all big. And yeah.
Right. If you're already having drastic changes in the way that you're holding your pelvis and the way that you're holding your ribs, because that actually happens quite quickly, right? It makes sense. Okay. So just the dream team of the 4, of course there are others, but rotation in the thorax, spaciousness in the posterior pelvic floor, IR of the iliums and the femurs, pronation, supination of the feet. Learn from me or don't do that. And it's awesome. And why, and other ones, if I were to add a few, would be softness in the jaw, mobility in the tongue, some like release, pull your tongue, cranial
Well, it
sacral.
sounds like too, because I went into this interview being like, how can we get these babies out? But it sounds like there's a lot more benefits than just that, you know? Yeah.
Well, okay, here's the best part, right? Is the peaches and cream combo is like, if we do that, if we have all that stuff, those babies are probably going to engage. They're probably going to engage. And I mean, I have another conspiracy theory, right? That is like, maybe your baby, maybe 43-week post-dates isn't actually just like as much a variation of normal. I've never actually seen a woman with good mobility with baby locked and loaded on the left go to 43 weeks. I'm not saying that it's never happened. Of course it's happened. Who am I? I'm just like a random bozo. Like, just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean anything. But I think in many cases, we're seeing babies that are struggling to engage, likely because of some of these patterns, that if they were actually resolved, that baby might be able to enter the inlet more easily. The angle at which that baby enters the inlet is absolutely going to impact how they're going to rotate down through the mid pelvis, right? Rotation in that mid pelvis. If we don't, again, that finger pinching to the non-pinching, we get that the little bit of room, that ability for the sacrum to move that little bit, that ability for those iliums to widen a little bit. Oh my gosh, the rotation, it can happen, baby can descend. And by the time we get to the outlet, I mean, I'm not saying the outlet is easy peasy. It's like, obviously all stages matter, but I see a lot of the challenges I see are babies that struggle to engage in the inlet and struggle to rotate in the mid pelvis. That's the majority. Do you agree with that, with what you see?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're allowing for these actions to happen in prenatal care, like if we're like, this is what we're teaching in prenatal care, this is like how we're helping people move, not just be like, keep moving, do your steps and go to prenatal yoga, which like maybe they're walking totally asymmetrically, maybe they're waddling and prenatal yoga is telling them to forward fold and do deep squats. We might be actually exacerbating the issues that we're trying to solve. And it's such low-hanging fruit for birth attendants, because I think, and I know maybe I made it too complicated, I'm not trying to, but there's so much impact we can have on the tissues. And this is what's amazing. Like, do you know what's hard to treat sometimes? I mean, like hypertension, that's hard to treat. You know what I mean? There are things that are actually hard to manage, but you can create a massive change in the tissues in like a relatively short amount of time. I've seen a woman who like couldn't get her baby to engage, was like 41 and 5, was just like struggling, felt like she was ready to give birth. We did like an hour-long session and like, boom, she lost her mucus plug, her water broke, she went into labor and had her baby in 8 hours. Would that have happened?
A lot about the like what some refer to as prodromal labor too, you know?
So much to say on this topic. I mean, okay. I mean, can I just keep, are we in it? Can we just like keep going on this stuff? Okay, cool. So like the prodromal labor, and we talk so much about the hormonal blueprint. I'm all here for the hormonal blueprint, honeys. It's amazing. We know we want to protect the hormonal blueprint, obviously, but let's think about what those hormones actually do. They do a lot of things, but one of their primary functions is to mobilize the tissue. That's what those hormones are doing. So if we are allowing this hormonal blueprint to unfold, but they get to try to be integrated and create this change in the structure, and that structure has never moved in that way in your entire life, that's a big ask for the hormonal blueprint. So to be thinking about the hormonal blueprint without the biomechanics is like the peanut butter without the jelly. Like, it doesn't actually make sense. They are entirely symphonic in how they're allowing the birth process to unfold. And I think sometimes there is this overemphasis. I don't want to put it like that. There is maybe a somewhat of unbalanced emphasis on just like, don't disturb the hormonal blueprint, without really looking at, can the hormones create the physiological change that they're intended to create, and how can we support that process?
Yeah, because
And
as like licensed midwives who act as traditional midwives, and we like, are a lot of different things for a lot of
which,
different.
like, round of applause for you. Plus, like, I think there's so much midwifery hate out there, and I just want to be like, you're fighting the good fight. I'm just like, I have so much professional and personal respect for that walk. So,
But there's a lot of like personal strife that I've dealt with. If I ever need, in quotes, or I'm asked to help in any way or do something, because then the mom feels like she failed and she needed help, and when really it should just like all unfold if she set herself up right and done all her things. And so then everyone feels bad for helping or needing help. And it's like there's this question in my mind of like, how did we get here in the first place if birth is, in quotes, supposed to work?
okay.
Is it us sitting too much? Is it like, like why are we needing this education?
Okay. So again, these are just theories that I have. And who am I? Right? Whatever. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not the most well-educated one.
What is your opinion on
But my opinion on the topic is like, this is midwifery care. The idea that we like
it always
this,
has been.
I personally think so. Well, I think there's two aspects. One, I think we're moving differently. I think we're moving less. I think we have less pelvic health and function due to sedentary lifestyles. Full stop. I know what my life looks like even 5 years ago and how that impacted my pelvic health. I mean, granted, I'm obsessed with this stuff, so like I work on it a lot, but like you don't have to be to birth your baby. Just PSA. You don't have to be obsessed with it to birth your baby. Your baby will probably come out just a little bit, can do a lot of help. So like, but I think our bodies are actually changing. I think we have more kyphotic posture, right? I also, so we're more posteriorly tilted in the pelvis. We have less pelvic mobility. We sit more, we move less. Like, I think all of that absolutely has an impact. Now, exactly what that impact is, I think is hard to measure. And I think that they're like, how we move, of course, impacts how our babies move. And I want to just maybe share that a little bit. There's a lot of emphasis on the cardinal movements and like the movements that babies are doing. And what I personally want to offer is that, like, if you've seen a newborn, they're often like toneless little angel squish baby muffins. Like, they're not these like rocking and rolling head control mobile babies. They're not. They're a newborn. So this idea that like your baby, I used to say this, your baby is finding their way through the pelvic pathway. I mean, like, okay, yes, they're moving from the darkness to the light in the most incredible, integrated spiritual journey of all time, potentially. And your baby is being moved by your pelvic tissues. Full stop. They move where our bodies, where the maternal body moves that baby. They're not.
And allows them to move.
Yeah, they just don't have that tone. They don't have head control. They're not. So this idea that like, oh, the cardinal movements, how the baby is moving. I'm like, well, how the baby, one way that the baby can be moved by maternal tissues. I'm not saying they're like passive participants by any means, but I think it's just helpful to remember what a newborn actually looks like when we're thinking about this. And I will get back to prodromal labor. But what you're saying, why is this happening? Why are we needing this much support? I think that is one aspect of it. I also think that for all of womankind, this was midwifery care. Hands-on, hands-in. Where is the baby? How do I manually, physically help a baby be born? I really do believe that. And this is a learning edge for me too, of just like kind of historical and indigenous midwifery care. Meaning, that's not where I received my education. So I don't want to speak to that over, in a way that is above my collar, because I'm sure there's midwives that have learned and studied in those environments, and we're so grateful and, can't wait to hear from you as well. But the idea that like, okay, if we talk about, this is maybe a little controversial, but like, if we talk about VEs, right, vaginal exams, so like gauging dilation. So I definitely came up in a world that was like, there was never a reason to do a vaginal exam. Like, I really thought that. And as I learned this more, and this is a skill that like I don't really have. It's not a skill I was taught, it's a skill I want to like learn and understand better. But like really assessing fetal positioning with the assistance of a vaginal exam has nothing to do with dilation. I don't care at all about dilation effacement. That's not even what I'm looking for. I'm like, how can I actually feel where this baby is? Hand outside, hand inside, not often, not over and over, whatever. But so I'm actually understanding more what is happening and how this baby is or isn't rotating so that I can actually help this baby move through the pelvic pathway through positioning, through support, through rebozo, if that's in your skill set, through hands-on body work, like how I can actually help the baby move through the pelvic pathway. And I think that based on what? I'm not quite sure, right? I've told you all the reasons why this maybe isn't the most historically informed, because I don't even know if we have that historical information to turn back to. But that is actually what's always been available to us to some degree in midwifery care. And the more I learn about Indigenous midwifery practices, the more I hear of essentially body work being a massive aspect, or what we would now call body work being a massive aspect of midwifery care, and really how women were able to, from outside, from skill palpation, and just like assess positioning and impact descent. And so I do think
I was
that
gonna say, besides palpation, there isn't really any hands-on skills besides.
no, I learned nothing about, and even palpation is like,
Yeah.
you palpate for your two, as again, Nicole Morales had said this, and she was like, you palpate for your 2 or 3 letters.
Yeah.
That's it. So you take what, 20 seconds? Oh, OP, LOA, right?
Not a lot of details.
Not a lot of details, and not a lot about like what is happening in the tissue. Why is this baby here? What else is here? Right? What's happening in all of these surrounding soft tissue structures? What's happening in the fascia? What's happening in the musculature? What's happening in the respiratory diaphragm? And how is that impacting? I mean, we see the breech babies with the mushroom heads. Why do they have these mushroom heads? Repetitive motion of the respiratory diaphragm. If we know that the movement of our respiratory diaphragm is entirely shaping our baby's skulls, why aren't we assessing and feeling and palpating and addressing how the diaphragm is moving? If we know it's shaping our actual babies, of course it's shaping the birth process, the maternal body, and how they move through the pelvis. So, and that's just one structure. So adding this and being able to, as many of my teachers say, see with your hands, and really taking this, discussion out of like the pathology or the licensure or the non-licensure, or am I helping or am I hindering or whatever. And again, is this an opportunity to let something unfold, or is this an invitation where something I do might be of service? The answer to that question is midwifery skill, right? That's the lifelong, in my opinion, that's like how I answer that question and why, and the mistakes and the places where I've interacted where that might not have been of service, and where I could have had an invitation to act where that actually wasn't of service. Like that's the skill that's only developed, in my opinion, through time and through practice and through humbly trying to figure it out and talking to other women about what they did. And it actually has nothing to do with licensure, pathology, non-pathology. It's actually just practice, which, whew, what a big deal that we have to practice on each other. It's like, it's a walk to walk, but I guess that's the other aspect that I think. Why is it like this? I think this is a skill that's been lost. I think birth does work quite well in general. And so therefore it works most of the time without these skills. But now our bodies are changing and these skills might be more needed than ever, and we're less familiar with them than ever. And I never learned any of this in any of my midwifery education. I learned this as like, learning to learning to, address structural pain and discomfort and being like, oh my God, of course this impacts our babies. Yeah. And how do we really bring that work together? And the cool thing about those, if I'm talking back to those 4 actions, and again, I like the ones with the mouth, tongue, craniosacral, but that's we're not going into that today. That's also how you're going to heal your prolapse. That's also how you're going to, have, improved orgasmic capacity. That's also a huge aspect to healing chronic vaginal concerns, interstitial cystitis, swelling in the bladder, and displacement. It's also an aspect to, dealing with sort of hypertonic pelvic floor, pain with penetration, that kind of thing. So it's great. You know what I mean? Like this is like what's helpful for birth is helpful for pelvic function, whether or not you ever want to give birth or not. Optimizing the body for the birth process to unfold is going to be optimal for pelvic health and longevity. So also working on this in your, one of my other conspiracy theories. I was talking about this with
That's gonna be the title of this episode.
Oh my God, my conspiracy theory is, I mean, again, right? We're just
Adelaide Meadow, another conspiracy theory.
oh my God. It's
I'm just
like,
kidding.
is that prolapse doesn't, like, birth doesn't cause prolapse. I don't think it does. I think all this stuff causes prolapse. And then we birth, and then we put a bunch of stress on stressed out tissues. So like maybe it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, but like like that's not, so therefore, I won't dive into that conspiracy theory, but like if we're optimizing our pelvic health and function in our pregnancies, it's really, really helpful for our postpartum integration. It's really helpful for then, being comfortable and being able to return to actions of daily living sooner, happier, easier.
Well, I know we're running out of time, but I did want to bring you back to prodromal in case there was anything you wanted to
Prodromal labor. Okay.
That is a question that a lot of people have.
Totally. So again,
I experienced it. How could I never do that again? Or
I mean, I have a few thoughts, right? I don't know if this will work, if this will solve everything, whatever. But I started before I got off on my tangent of the blueprint versus the hormonal matrix versus the biomechanical matrix. But one thing that is an aspect of developing, and a pretty predominant aspect of developing a healthy labor progression, is consistent pressure of baby's head or bum on a relatively, I don't want to say symmetrical, but balanced, like in a balanced amount of pressure on the cervix. Now, if your babe is in a position where that pressure is maybe asymmetrical, I wouldn't really call it asynclitic at that point, but where you're not having even and balanced pressure and contact from baby's head or bum on the cervix, it is that even, balanced, and pressure and stable contact that is a major aspect of allowing that hormonal blueprint to emerge. It's not just hormonal blueprint puts baby in this, like moves the tissues to put baby in this position. It's baby being in this position that is part of triggering the cascade that allows that hormonal process to unfold. So if we're thinking about prodromal labor and we're thinking about this start-stop, essentially sort of a start-stop early labor pattern, or maybe you like think it's picking up and you're like, I don't know, every 10 minutes for 3 hours or something. And then it's like, well, JK. And then that happens. And then nothing for 4 hours. And then again for 5 hours. And they do that for a week. Oh my God, let's all pray for that queen and just be like, have some snacks and chill. So what I am sort of considering there is, where is baby and what is maybe baby not, or I don't want to say hung up on necessarily, but how is their position potentially not allowing for that even, stable, and balanced pressure? Is baby all the way on one side? Are they not actually resting sort of in the middle? Like, do you have like a lot of restriction? If you look at someone's stance and like, oh, are they shifted way forward one hip or the other? Are they really hiked one shoulder or the other? Are they rib shifted laterally one direction or the other? Rib flared, meaning like forward and back on one aspect of the thorax. And all of that lack of balance is likely your baby is not going to have as many options within how they're able to make contact with the cervical tissues and really enter the pelvic inlet. And when we see that, then they're like moving, ideally, right? They're moving and trying, or you're moving and trying, and there can be like contact, less contact, contact, less contact, contact, less contact, as opposed to consistent, steady contact equals uterine involution equals increased contact equals uterine involution. And now we're cooking with gas, right? Now we start to have an established labor pattern, which again, at the beginning of your birth process, early labor or whatever. But if we're talking about this prolonged prodromals, that's one thing I think can be happening in those circumstances. And often, if women might see a skilled body worker or have midwives that are, learning these hands-on skills, then either you might do a session and your things might totally stop, or then they kick into gear, right? Where we might actually like, everything moves and settles, and now you're just more comfortable. And it turns out you're not in labor. You were just having this sort of stimulus because of, something poking, kicking, and you're feeling weird, and your body is intelligent and trying to move your baby because they're in a position that's not optimal. So, I don't know. I don't want to pseudoscience that, but I think that there could be some intelligence to some mobilization of the uterus to try to move the baby into a better position that's not quite the labor process.
Yeah.
And that might be pseudoscience-y, but that's one aspect of it. And so then if that was the case, maybe things just chill. And now you're like, oh, I'm just more comfortable and not in labor. Or maybe there's a sense of chill. And then on like Donkey Kong 3 hours later, right? Which is something else that I've seen unfold. So really, this is what I'm thinking about. I mean, all of third try. I mean, I'm thinking about this all day, every day, preconception, but like certainly, by third try, I'm like body work and postpartum planning. Like that's my orientation from a prenatal care perspective.
Yeah. And so, how do you support women? Like, shout out your offerings. Like, obviously, you probably work with people prenatally. Do you do like spot things where someone's like, oh my gosh, I'm just like having all this prodromal stuff? And then, like, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah. Okay. So I have lots of things. But if you're interested in this stuff, in the like, what are the actions? How do I do this in pregnancy? What does this even for midwifery care? Interested in that, Born Through Movement is my, it's a self-paced course. You can take this. It's broken into these three different aspects where you're looking at what's happening at the level of the the pelvic inlet, the mid pelvis, and the outlet. We're interested in what's happening from a anatomy and physiology perspective, what's happening for the level of the mom and baby, and then somatically connecting with that level of the pelvis, which there's like follow along somatic connection videos that you can either do if you're a mom, or you can, learn and use this stuff if you're wanting to utilize it with your clientele. Then there's also follow along movement practices per trimester that are really based on being helpful in that way. So that I think is really great. And then we're also looking at pain resolution, which is not something we talked about specifically, but like maybe you don't just have SI joint pain and pubic symphysis pain in your pregnancy and it's something to be dealt with. Let's think about how like your pain is your baby's restriction. Like if you are actually not moving well, your baby actually has less space. And so not only can we resolve your discomfort, and there's a lot of sort of movement snacks and sort of movement medicinal tips. So like if you have this pain, do this, and doing that consistently can often inform your fetal positioning, which can be really helpful for everything that we're talking about. So there's a whole section about pain resolution for the big ones: swelling, heartburn, mid back pain, low back pain, SI joint pain, sciatic pain, and pubic symphysis pain. And we go through all of them and say, try this, this, and this, do it in this way, do it with this level of consistency to resolve symptomology in pregnancy, and ideally be supportive of, ease and comfort for your baby. Don't even get me started on the fascial restrictions in our babies, that they're all born with all this fascial adhesion. And like, what if they were actually able to move better in utero? Would we see babies that were less stiff, less torticollis, less tongue tie issue, less breastfeeding, better able to be mobile and just more comfortable? I think there's a lot to think about there, that this is like, you're just caring for your baby as well, which is so sweet and tender. So Born Through Movement, if you're into that, that is great. If you're interested in this conversation specifically. And then if you want to work with me one-on-one, absolutely. I do distance prenatal care. So a lot of women that either don't have midwives near them or have, not really prenatal care ultimately, that I think is done in person, but like prenatal education. So if you want to meet with someone because there's no midwife near you, you're looking for childbirth education, maybe you're planning an unassisted birth, or maybe you're planning a birth with a midwife that you have near you, but it's not actually checking your boxes. I see women and their partners, and I do that. And I do that virtually. What else? I teach prenatal yoga, but that I think is actually functional because I think most of it's dysfunctional. I teach that 4 times a year, so you can come and take live movement classes with me. And then I have other courses on like strength training for the female body, healing your prolapse and diastasis, like real biodynamic solutions that are all based on the brilliance of our female anatomy. And that rather than kind of coming from like, I'm a strength trainer who, is doing prenatal and postpartum training, which is amazing. I'm like, yes, personal trainer and strength trainer, but also have this deep midwifery background. And I really want those to come together. So, that is, depending on what you're interested in. But if you're here listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in birth. My course on birth specifically is Born Through Movement. And then, yes, I see women for virtual care. And if you are like, my baby is down in my right hip, I can't move, I have a side joint pain and I'm 40 weeks. What do? Shoot me an email because you'll probably won't be able to book in through my scheduling because I usually book out further than that. But I'm always trying to women who are actually in a moment of need I will always try and fit you in and help you and see you for 75 minutes virtually and see what we can do. And my prayer for you is to try this stuff before your 40 weeks. And also, as I shared before with that story earlier in this podcast, I saw that woman at 41 and 5. Now, would that have happened if she had never spoken to me? Who knows? I don't get to know. If it was the work that we did that immediately made her, baby move, water break on like Donkey Kong. I have no idea. She thinks so, which that is valid to me, if that's what she thinks. And I think that we can just make that little bit of slide, do that little bit of pain resolution that can actually make a ton of difference. So, and yeah, that's that.
And we'll leave it all in the show notes, but can you say your email and the ways people can connect with you?
Totally. So my name, Adelaide, like lemonade, Adelaide Meadow, Adelaide Meadow, Meadow. And that's all of it. Adelaide Meadow on Insta, hello@adelaidemeadow.com. adelaidemeadow.com is where you can find all of my courses and ability to work with me virtually. And then, and then of course I see women in person. So if you're, interested in that, you can shoot me an email still. Probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Where are you, for people who are near you?
For the moment, I am in rural Western North Carolina, really near the Georgia and Tennessee border. But I'm only here for the summer. So stay tuned because I have a farm here that I'm selling because I'm going to be caring for my elderly mother. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, but but I am here and I have a few birth clients and lots of prenatals and all that. So I'm just interested in supporting moms of babies and really just learning from other midwives too, right? I find that I'm thinking about where I'm going to go after this. And I'm like, I want to go do another preceptorship. I'm like, who can I go and just attend births with for 3 months and we can just geek out together. And, hopefully be an asset to someone else as well. And I just bring that up because I feel like I just learned so much from the way other women practice. And I'm really interested in that kind of collaborative approach, especially across what can seem like the giant licensure, non-licensure divide. So that divide doesn't interest me. The ideology doesn't interest me as much. Birth happens in the body. Birth is a somatic experience. So the more we can bring it back to the body, which is obviously what we just talked about for however long. But that's also just my interest as well, is just learning and being sort of in the culture of how we can support midwives and moms and babes.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. I learned so much today, and I know our listeners are going to geek out on it too.
Oh, and if you're like a geek muffin, if you're like, yeah, let's talk about this, I'm like, right? I don't know. Let's talk it out. And I think that, I guess last thing I do with my work wife, Mandy Verghese, she's amazing. She's a licensed midwife up in BC. We couldn't have more different midwifery backgrounds, but we really jive as body workers. We lead monthly calls called Birth and Body Work. And our next one is on June 26th, and it's a 3-hour call all about breech. So if you're interested in that, we talk about other things. We've done ones on OP positioning, part 1, part 2. We've done another one on prodromal. We've done another one on post dates. So if you're interested in that and want to geek out, open to moms, birth attendants, body workers, midwives. Our dream is that we get chiropractors and L&D nurses. So if you want to come and talk with us live about some of this stuff, because we're learning together and we really learn from the people who come, because all of us have so much, sort of expertise. And if we can just bring this lens, I think we'll really be supportive to more moms and babes. So if you're a geek about it, get at me, because I can't wait to hear from you too.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sophia. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you for the work and the podcast that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to the Born Wild podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe every week to get the latest one.
And please follow us on Instagram at Born Wild Podcast, as well as Facebook. You can also write to us at info@bornwildmidwifery.com. as well as our website, bornwildmidwifery.com.
And remember,
Stay wild.